And on this first day of February, journalists in Mexico are mourning the murder of yet another colleague, the fourth to be killed since the start of this year. Mexico City ranks as one of the most dangerous places in the world for journalists. Reporters are being targeted for exposing corruption at the top. The murders have sparked angry protests, and the government is under pressure to make it safer for journalists to do their job.
Journalist Roberto Toledo was preparing to record an interview when he was shot. He died from his wounds in hospital. The director of the online paper Toledo worked for, Monitor Michoacán, said the team had been receiving death threats for months. Today, those threats became concrete. Exposing corrupt administrations and corrupt officials and politicians today led to the death of one of our colleagues. Toledo's killing follows those of 3 other Mexican journalists in January 2022 alone. One of them was reporter Lourdes Maldonado Lopez. She was found shot dead in her car in the border city of Tijuana. In 2019, she had appealed to Mexico's President Obrador himself after becoming involved in a dispute with a prominent politician and media owner. Mr. President, I've come to ask you for support, help and justice because I fear for my life. The spate of killings has put reporters across Mexico on edge and sparked protests asking the government to step up protection for media workers.
And for more on this now, I want to bring in Javier Gaza. He is a journalist in Mexico and a consultant on journalist protection at the World Association of Newspapers. Javier, it's good to have you on the program. I mean, the numbers here are really bad. The 4th killing of a journalist in Mexico this year. Reporters Without Borders says 50 journalists have been killed over the past 5 years in Mexico. How do you explain what's going on?
Hi, Brent. Thank you for having me. It's really tough to explain because we are looking at 2 main causes or main reasons why this is happening. One is the spree of attacks against journalists, not just murders. Murder is, of course, the most extreme form of attack, but threats of every kind, spying, harassment, surveillance, etc. The spree of attacks against journalists that we have been experiencing for the last 15 years under different governments. So this is not a problem of the current federal government in Mexico. This is a problem that we have been accumulating for years, but it has accelerated under this government because we are seeing that contrary to what was promised by current President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who got to office with the campaign platform of eliminating corruption and eliminating violence, there is a total lack of commitment. I would even say a lack of interest on the part of the government for tackling this issue. And so this fuels impunity. This makes crimes against journalists to go unpunished, and everybody who thinks about attacking a journalist can do so with the knowledge that they can get away with it.
And Reporters Without Borders labels Mexico the most dangerous place for journalists in the world. And based on what you're saying, it sounds like journalists are being targeted, not only from the drug cartels, but also possibly from, all the way up to the highest levels of government.
Journalists are being targeted from multiple sources. Usually, it is drug cartels who carry out the most extreme form of attack, which is the assassination. But we have also been seeing, particularly in the last years, this collusion between criminal organizations, drug cartels, or other criminal organizations, and local government officials at the municipal or the state level, police forces or other security forces, sort of conflate in order to mask the real purpose of killing a journalist. Let's say, for example, a local authority has a problem with a journalist, so an assassination can be ordered, but it can be outsourced, so to speak, to a criminal group. And so it will look like a hit by a criminal organization. So there's all these different combinations together. And sometimes the government would minimize the crimes by saying, well, the journalist wasn't really a journalist because he was working on something else. The last case of Roberto Toledo, we saw a response from the federal government saying that he was working on something else, not as a journalist. And so it gets very murky.
And Javier, we want to remind our viewers, you work as a security consultant for other journalists, and we expect to hear that when we're talking about war zones. But we're talking about Mexico. I mean, what safety advice do you give journalists who are working in Mexico?
Yeah, but I work on these issues because I experienced violence myself as the editor of a newspaper that came under fire from drug cartels in several occasions. So some of the lessons that I learned is that each regional dynamic is very different. What's happening in Michoacán, where we had the latest killing of a journalist, is very different from Tijuana, for example, where the case of Lourdes Maldonado, for instance. So we have to get to the bottom of the local circumstances and what are the dynamics, the criminal dynamics, the political dynamics that fuel violence against journalists. But the advice that I give journalists is you need to have a safety protocol, a safety plan based on those local dynamics. You really have to know your turf and design the appropriate safety measures. And unfortunately, this is true. You have to be very certain, very aware that you cannot rely on the government for help because they are not helping. On the contrary, sometimes they're making the problem worse.
Yeah, that is a tragic commentary on the security situation, also on the state of government by the people in Mexico. Javier Garza, journalist there in Mexico, we appreciate your time and your insights, and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent.